Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode is part 2 of the Q&A, and as with the last one, the whole episode is my opinion, so we will not do a separate segment on opinion. Let's get right to the questions. The first question I got was asking my opinion on steam or no steam. And I would say that that might rank almost right up there with pressing your seams open or to one side, or wash or not to wash. Many people only use steam. Many people say never use steam. As with my pressing seams open or to one side, I do different with different pieces. If it's all squares and rectangles and I have all straight grains, I don't mind using steam. When I've got bias edges and I really don't want them to stretch, I make sure I flip that steam button off. So I am not all one or the other. I use steam sometimes and sometimes I do not. And then I had a question. How do you put together the quilt top, batting, and backing? And I use the long arm. So I don't do it the way most people would do it at home. But when I did do it at home, I would tape the backing to a table, or you can pin it to a floor carpet, then smooth the batting on top, and then smooth the quilt top on top, making sure you have enough excess backing and batting all the way around so that you're able to quilt it. And then how do you hold it together? There's lots of ways. You can hand stitch like a basting, or many people use the curved basting pins. Some people like the 505 spray. You hold it all the layers together. You can spray on the batting and then smooth the quilt top on top. Some people don't like using the spray on the inside of your house for fumes reasons. Alex Anderson came up with her Quilter Select, what is it called? Free Fuse. And this you shake onto the fabric and then press it with an iron, and it holds it for you to then be able to quilt it. So there's lots of different ways. Just see what works for you, what you like to use. My next question is it necessary to use titanium needles to quilt? And while I use a long arm, not titanium needles, I am not an expert machine quilter, free motion, on a domestic machine. I keep practicing, but I would never call myself an expert. So I consulted who I call the experts. There's many more than these ladies, but Angela Walters is at the top of my queue of the best machine quilters. Renee Merrill does beautiful work. Pat Sloan is a very good teacher, and she's got a lot of informational books. And Natalia Bonner, if you've ever seen her stuff on Instagram, she is amazing. And I looked in their books to see what they said they used. Angela Walters said she uses a universal needle for piecing and for quilting, and in the book that I have here. But I'm quite certain I saw in a later one of her books that she does like the titanium needles. And I've heard the titanium needles last longer. So I do stock the Class A titanium quilting needles, 80-12 size. And I think those are a really good option for machine quilting. There's also machine quilting needles. We use always Schmetz, and they have different sizes of them. And some of these ladies recommend top stitch needles. So I would say try them out. See what works best for you. The one thing to always remember, the higher the number, the fatter the needle. So if you're using a thicker thread, you want a higher number needle. If you're using thin thread, you want a lower number needle. So I think that's kind of more important than the actual type of needle. but give them a try and see what works for you. Because as we keep always saying, everybody likes something different. So I could recommend one thing and you could all say, I didn't like that needle. Okay, my next question. The viewer stated that she doesn't buy patterns because she doesn't have a quilt shop close enough by to go in and get help with poorly written patterns. Well, I'm sorry that you don't live close enough to get to a good quilt shop that can help you out. She asks, what would I suggest as well written patterns? Well, the one I mentioned previously is Atkinson Designs. They have fabulous patterns. I showed you before the um, Yellow Brick Road and the Tile Tango. They also have some books. This is one of our favorite books, Let's Do Lunch. We've made this table runner over and over again over the years. We never get sick of it. So these have really good instructions. Another line of patterns that I like are the Deb Tucker patterns. The one caution I would say with Deb Tucker's are she uses all her tools. So if you're not familiar with her tools, the patterns can be difficult. What I would do is if I wanted to do one of her tools, I would practice learning the tool first. And then when you read the directions, they'll make sense. But if you just have never used one and opened up one of these patterns, you might get a little frustrated. But take it one step at a time. Her tools are fabulous. You end up with perfect pieces. Everything comes together great. The instructions are really, really good. Another pattern line that I just love, and you're going to see a lot of her stuff in one of the upcoming videos, is Elizabeth Hartman. She has some of these large-sized ones that have many different animals in them. She doesn't always do animals, but she has a lot of animals. And then she has the smaller patterns that have one item, or in this case, animals, a shark. But her patterns are really well written, easy to follow. She does use a lot of the stitch a square corner to corner and flip. So there is a little bit of waste, but the results that you get, I find, are so well worth it. I find her patterns so much fun to make. I've made several of them, and there's still several I want to make. So many patterns, so little time. I highly recommend these if you need a pattern like this for the project you want to do. Another line of patterns that I really like are Gudrun Erla's. She has Strip Your Stash. She's the one who designed the Stripology ruler that I love. Her patterns are really well written, and I really enjoy doing her patterns as well. Many of them, even though they're made for yardage or pre-cuts, you can almost always transform her patterns from scraps and stash rather than buying new yardage. So I really like hers. The only odd thing that she has, because she is from Iceland, so she's not from America to start with, she sometimes uses some language that is not quite the way we would say it, but you can figure it out. They're still well written. They have pressing directions, which I always like. The last one I'm going to mention, and by all means, these are not the only good patterns out there. There are good patterns out there for sure. I love Lori Holt's patterns. I just think they're fun. Um, they're well written patterns. Each one of her books has a ton of things in them. Sometimes you'll just pick out one piece of it and use it, or 3 or 4 pieces and use it in something. You don't have to make the whole thing if you don't want. And if you want to make the whole thing, all the instructions are in here. So these are a lot of fun to do too. If you're looking to find a well-written pattern, what you're looking for, to me, is pressing directions. And not all of these have this next one. The other thing I like, and I've mentioned this before, I like patterns to say this unit should now measure 2.5 by 5.5, or whatever it's supposed to be, so that as each step, as you build the block, you know, you can measure and see if you're right. Now, I always say make a practice block. So when you make your practice block, if your pattern doesn't have those instructions, you can jot them down on the pattern. Oftentimes, I make a copy of the pattern so I can write all over it. And that's where I would write. I hate to write, in a book or on the actual pattern. So if you make a copy, you can write all over it and not feel bad about it. But those are the two things I'd look for: pressing directions and what units should measure, and also language should be clear. We have a couple of patterns that they're so wordy. They take 3 paragraphs to write something that could be done in 2 sentences. They're not always so fun to make. What else do we have? Okay. What batting would you choose for a wall hanging with straight line quilting? I don't think that the issue should be what kind of quilting it is. The fact that it's a wall hanging is I want it to be flat. Now, for most quilts, baby quilts, adult quilts, we use 100% cotton or the 70-30 blend. We use all Quilter's Dream batting. We like it the best. I know other people like other brands, and that's all well and good. You have to use what you like. We use the Quilter's Dream because they have so many different fiber contents. So we use mostly blend and cotton. But for wall hangings, I would make a different choice. And I'm a fiber snob, but one of my choices is their poly batting. And their poly does not feel like other brands of poly. This stuff is nice. They also have a thinner. This is the select weight, the second to thinnest weight. They also have a request weight, and I use that a lot for table runners, placemats, table toppers, when you want everything to lie flat and you don't want your glass of wine to tip over. So I really like their poly, and it's not too expensive either. The other big choice for wall hangings is their Dream Bamboo. It used to be called Dream Orient. It's now Dream Bamboo, but it's the same thing, and it's just luxurious. It's a little pricey, but it just drapes beautifully. So that's another choice for batting for a wall hanging. Okay, how about just a couple more and we'll wrap it up. Why am I a Bernina dealer? Well, I'm a Bernina dealer because my customers told me to be. When we first opened the shop in our other location and we had classes, if we had 4 people in a class, 3 or 4 of them had Berninas. My customers kept saying, you have to be a Bernina dealer. You have to be a Bernina dealer. So I took their advice, and I couldn't be more happy. I think these machines are fabulous. They're quiet. They make beautiful stitches. I just couldn't be happier. And the nice thing is, Bernina's right here in the Chicagoland area. They're in Aurora. So if I have trouble with a machine, I can drive it out there and have it serviced. While we do have service people who come in, and they 99% of the time can fix any of our problems. If I do need the techs from Bernina, they're right here. So I couldn't be happier to be a Bernina dealer. Okay, here's a really subjective question. How much fabric do you buy when you're in a quilt shop, you find fabric that you fall in love with, but you don't have a pattern in mind? That couldn't be more subjective. Obviously, I don't run into that much here because I can cut more off the bolt if I need it. But what I did prior to owning the quilt shop was, if it was a gorgeous fabric that I knew I really, really loved, I would buy 3 yards. And that would be as if it was an adult fabric, because that would give you enough to use it in the quilt and use it as a border, and maybe have a little left over, maybe even enough for binding. If it was a a childlike themed fabric, I might buy 1.5 or 2 yards, obviously, because if you're making a baby quilt, you don't need as much. But it's really subjective. Some people buy 1 yard, some people buy 5 yards. Everybody's different. But I would say 3 yards for an adult fabric and 1.5 to 2 yards for a child or baby themed fabric. And I'm going to wrap it up with one more, and that's how do you store your scraps and stash? If you have a collection of fabrics, do you keep them together or do you split them into color? And I think I kind of graduate over time from keeping the collections together. And then if I haven't used them, or if I did make a quilt with it and then still have some left over, they definitely get separated into color. No, I don't use the cardboard rolls. I just use shoe boxes. You've seen shoe boxes in my videos. I use shoe boxes all the time. I have some plastic tubs, not tons of them. And sometimes things end in plastic bags. But I'm pretty much go after making a quilt towards color. Maybe the exception is the quilts I showed you last time with the wedge ruler, where I made 2 quilts that were specifically only from leftovers from one project. But I would do that pretty fast after the project. Otherwise, split up into color. But that, again, is just my opinion. And this whole episode is just my opinion. So I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Until next time, happy sewing.